Hello, everybody, and welcome to Project HR, a podcast dedicated to building better workplaces. I'm your host, Beth Pilgreen. Leadership is a skill that is in constant evolution. The things that made a good leader 20 years ago, 10 years ago, even 5 years ago, are not necessarily the same things that make a good leader today. And the truth is, keeping up with these ever-changing dynamics to become better leaders ourselves, as well as to more accurately anticipate the needs of our organizations, is a critical part of HR. Happily, John Eades is here to help us out. John is the CEO of Learnloft, a leadership development company that's, quote, on a mission to elevate the way you lead. He's also the host of the Follow My Lead podcast, and most recently the author of Building the Best, 8 Proven Leadership Principles to Elevate Others to Success. John, thanks so much for being with us today.
I am excited to be here.
We're glad that you are here. So my first question for you is, on your website, you reference a seismic shift that took place within organizational culture in the 21st century, and that kind of set the stage for your book. I'd love to talk about that shift and what happened in your mind.
The big thing that's really started to occur, Beth, is that I don't want to say there's been a shift to the people, but there's been a shift to the people because of technology, because of how easily and more fluidly we communicate via social media or, the work websites of the day, whether it be LinkedIn or other places where we can get a really clear picture of what that culture's like, what that workplace is like, what the leaders are like in it. It's created more transparency, and that's made us shift to put more of our focus on our people versus the profit. And certainly the profits are important because organizations don't run without revenue, but there's been a much more concerted effort to say, how are we going to go invest in and develop our people, because they're our most important asset.
Do you think that this has disrupted the traditional managerial practices, so to speak?
I would say the principles remain the same. I mean, what made a really good leader in terms of some core leadership principles haven't changed so much as it is the way it's shifted over the years. And I'll explain. So
Yeah.
when you start to get into relationships are still key, like they were 15, 20 years ago, no doubt. But how we build relationships today might be slightly different. As an example, I might need to do a better job of being vulnerable or having empathy for my people today. Not that it wasn't important 15, 20 years ago, Beth, but it's maybe more important today because it's talked about more and people kind of want or demand it more from their leaders than they used to. That kind of command and control leadership dying, and this kind of new breed of leadership where it's focused on elevating others and the people in the organization is where it's shifted.
And what do you think some of the cultural attributes have been in the last, let's say, 10 years that have led managers and leaders in the workplace to need to focus on their employees more and show empathy and show more personal contact?
At its simplest level, it's employee engagement, it's performance. I mean, we think of leadership today as like, this soft thing. And at the end of the day, great leaders get great performance.
That's
And they
right.
do that because they're invested in their people and they're helping them improve and get better. And they raise the bar of not what good looks like, but they define what great looks like. And they do that leaning on these strong relationships that they've developed and maintained. And so, we like to make it really complicated, and it's at its core, it's not that complicated, but it is hard.
It is hard because you're dealing with people as opposed to just focusing on a bottom line. Like, I hope that everybody listening hears that you're not going to get better performance through a really well-crafted email or
That's right.
or a lecture or a meeting. Like, it really is in relationships and engagement.
Well, you start thinking about why it's so hard.
Yeah.
Because one, we're dealing with human beings, and human beings are tough. One of my mentors always says, John, everybody's going through something, whether you know it or not.
Mhm.
And so not only do I believe that to be true, now you're going to lead a team of people that are going through something. and we don't necessarily know what it is. Hopefully, with good relationships, they'll share some of that stuff with us so we can be more educated. But the human element of leadership is what makes it so hard.
Hmm.
But that's not it. I mean, you have hierarchical issues where people are kind of jockeying for their position and their authority and their power, and that makes it really complicated. And then the last piece, what we think makes it so complicated today, is the ground that we're leading on is shifting so quickly. I mean, our work environments with technology and how quickly things are changing at a pace that they've never changed like that before means that it just adds another layer of complexity to why leadership is so hard. And those three big reasons make it extremely challenging.
What do you think are some of the qualities, both in character but also practical leadership qualities, that make for a good leader today that maybe weren't a part of a manager's toolbox back in our parents' day, for example?
It's a good question. At its core, I'll take one step back and kind of define
Sure.
leadership, and then we'll get into these things because
Okay.
there's so many different definitions of leadership.
I agree.
If you go hit Google right now, you'll get 30, 40,000 different definitions. So, I think it's for good reason that there's so many different definitions, because most people that are effective leaders, they care deeply about passing on that knowledge. So they want to leave behind some of these best practices and ideas that they've learned in leading. And I appreciate that with all my heart. For the sake of this discussion, I want to define leadership this way: someone whose actions inspire, empower, and serve in order to elevate others. Because
I
it
like that.
doesn't, and the reason these terms are chosen so carefully, because these three things that make up the key to successful leadership today, that word inspire, it comes from a Latin word which means to breathe life into. Now, I don't know about you, but I've been at a lot of organizations where I left work and I felt the opposite happened to me. I
Oh,
felt like
100%.
they squeezed the life right out of me, Beth,
Totally
and
deflated.
totally deflated. You
Yeah.
just feel like you're going home like you were a punching bag.
Yep.
And but that's not what the best leaders do. In fact, they do the opposite. They look to find ways to breathe life into their people because they know how challenging the work or the environment that they work in are. And there's all kinds of strategies that leaders use to inspire their people. We could go through some of those if you want.
Right.
And then the second key word there is, if I'm not only going to inspire, but then I got to go empower them. And all that word empower means is to allow people to make choices and decisions. People want to feel like they have some authority and control, and that they can dictate what they do, and they're not being told what to do all the time. Nobody likes a micromanager. I think that's where that second piece of empowerment becomes so important, is we've got to empower our people to make decisions where the information is. And that is one of the key areas of leader. And then the last part is just serve. How do you go flip that pyramid upside down and say, I work for my people? And if you can inspire, if you can empower, and you can serve, I promise you'll be on your way to elevating other people. And that's the key to successful leadership today.
I love that, and I've got some questions just to break it down a little bit more. I totally understand the inspire part, but how do you think, for those listening, like, how do you think that people practically can empower their employees? Because I know, it's one thing to allow them to be in the driving seat a little bit. I think sometimes leaders, they want to have control
Mhm.
over everything. So what does it look like to practically empower your employees, do you think? Or is that too vague?
No, it's not too vague. I think it can absolutely be broken down. We believe one of the primary responsibilities of a leader today is to be a coach to their people. And the reason for that is simple, because what people want or desire from a coach, or in this case, a leader, is they want one of three things. One is they want some transfer of competence. Can you help me develop my skills or the competence in my role or in my job? Very critical for a leader to play that role for their people. The second thing that they really want is they want some level of confidence. So, Can I have more belief in myself that I'm good enough for this job, that I'm capable, that I'm equipped, that I'm right where I'm supposed to be? And then the third part is they want some kind of idea of career progression. So just think of those three key things that a leader, if they're going to be a good coach to their people. And so you take those three things and you talk about how do we empower them better. Well, if we're going to go develop that competence up front, we've got to be able to help our people develop and get better so they can make better decisions. There's no way I would equip my 7-year-old son to go make a decision about our financial future. I mean, he's just not there yet.
Right. That's
One
wisdom.
day, one day he will be, right?
Mhm.
If I teach him and I coach him and I share competence with him to develop in that area. So that I use the analogy of a child, but it works the same at work, which is at some point he's got to be willing and able to make those decisions, or else he's going to come to dad his whole life. And we don't want that. So the same is true at work. Leaders have to go equip and coach their people up to develop the competence to be able to make those decisions the best that they know how. And that's where I think so many leaders get caught up in, well, just come to me for every decision that needs to be made. And it has an inverse effect. Our people stop developing and growing, and they don't even try to solve a problem. They say, let me ask my
Exactly.
manager. And that
Right.
is a huge problem in organizations.
Yeah, because they're never going to develop if they always have to do that. Why would they even use that part of their brain?
Yeah, that what my boss is going to make it anyway. So let me just ask him.
Exactly. Yes. I
That's
love
exactly.
thinking of it in terms of a coach. I love that analogy.
I'm all about practicality. Okay. And if we can't help leaders go apply, all this conversation or why we exist is for naught. Because at the end of the day, there's a big difference in knowledge and comprehension and application. So I always like to try to give, hopefully we can do this today with your listeners. What's one way that you can practically go do this with your people? And there's a short saying that I believe is just critical that leaders put in their vocabulary, and it's what I call magical coaching. And this is the whole thing. I have seen you solve problems like this before. Go ahead and make the decision. I will support you. Now just imagine if your boss said that to you. They said, Beth, I've seen you solve problems like this before. Go ahead and make that decision, and I'm going to support you.
Yeah, that is
Now,
very empowering.
oh my gosh, it's the best, because what does it do? It transfers belief. It
Mhm.
gives them that confidence, which is the second thing that they need, that says, I know you can do this. I know you can. I've seen you do it. You're ready to make this decision. Go make it. It doesn't mean it might not provide more opportunity down the road to say, well, what decision did you make? Asking some good what or how questions. But what an empowering statement to a team member when you say something like that versus just giving them the answer because you've been
Yes,
there before and you know
definitely. Yes. That's good for us to apply even personally too. So I am writing this down.
it.
So I'd love to ask you about what do you think the benefits are to a leader evolving their leadership style in these ways? And on the flip side, what do you think are the drawbacks if they don't?
It's a tough question because there's both benefits and drawbacks to the organization, and then there's benefits and drawbacks to the individual leader. And I'll dig into the individual leader for today because
Okay.
I think it's most important. The benefits of elevating others and leading and being a leader that inspires, empowers, and serves today is that you make a tremendous impact on the people that you get the opportunity to lead. And as a human being, much like you are and I am, Beth, I don't know that there's a higher calling in life because they can take your job away today. They cannot take away the impact that you have on the people that you get to lead. And we sit in workshops with leaders or we do keynotes or whatever we're doing. And I ask the simple question is, who's someone in your life that's elevated you that you think of? And a lot of people will come up with a parent or a grandparent. Occasionally you'll get a boss and I get really excited. But I tell you that because I want the people that are in those chairs or the people that are listening to this today to say, I can be that person for the people that I get to lead. And what a phenomenal thought about the impact of your life is for someone else to say your name when they're asked that question. Talk about legacy. I mean, talk about impact, man. I just don't know that there's anything better. And so when you talk about the benefits, you're talking about somewhat of an eternal impact on that person. And then every person that those people are going to come into contact with the way that they lead. And I just think that's beautiful. I think it's beautiful.
That's huge. I never I am very much I'm not a visionary person at all. So I think of the task at hand usually. I don't I have to like force myself to think, how is this going to impact me
Mm.
in a month or 2 months? But I think that's huge if we were to start thinking about what legacy are we leaving to the people around us. And yes, what incredible, like, did you just say eternal power? What was the word
Well, I
you
mean, yes, I did. I get a little deep sometimes. But here's the problem with
It's
it.
true though.
Here's the problem with it, Beth. How are our organizations run? What have you done for me this quarter? What's the revenue right now? And so
Yeah.
that's where the conflict comes in for leaders because
Mhm.
they're hired, measured, and fired based on the results this quarter or this year. And they're not hired, measured, and fired based on this long term impact on people. And that's
Mhm.
where it gets very challenging for a leader. And that's why I started to say, leadership is still about performance. It's still about getting people
Yeah.
to higher levels and to be able to achieve more because that gives us the platform and the opportunity to continue to make that kind of legacy and impact on our people. So we have to balance both things, and that's where it gets challenging.
All right, we are going to take a quick sponsorship break, but when we get back, we'll talk with John about how you can assess your current leadership style so that you'll understand what might need adjustment. Please stay with us. Thanks for listening. Also, thanks to A Better Leader for supporting this week's episode of Project HR. A Better Leader is leadership training that brings your leaders into alignment. A Better Leader's online platform improves engagement and morale and directly affects your bottom line. Get your free 2-week trial at abetterleader.com. All right, we are back with John Eades, author of Building the Best. John, the book was released in November of last year, and I hear you've had some pretty great reception, being recognized by Book Authority, Amazon, and Forbes. What was it that made you want to put all of this resource and knowledge into a book?
Well, it started with some hard failure. I got the opportunity to lead a team, something I'd really wanted to do. And we were building a learning technology company. We were about a year into building that business, Beth, and we were really struggling. I mean, like, it was just a battle every single day. And so, what do most young leaders do? They blame somebody else, which is
Mm,
exactly what I did.
mm.
And so, I called one of my most important and most expensive team members into my office at the end of a day, and I told her that I was going to be letting her go. And at the end of that meeting, she looked me right in the eyes and she said, "John, I didn't know where we were going. I didn't know what I was supposed to be doing. And I certainly didn't know I was helping us get there." And as anybody that sat in that chair that had to
Oh,
let someone
man.
go and they hear those words that the problem is not your team, but the problem is you, it's a difficult moment. And I won't lie to you. She walked out of my office, and I'm a pretty emotional guy. I probably will cry before the end of this podcast. Um, I put my head in my hands and I cried like a baby. I mean, I could not stop because I knew I had failed her and I'd failed my team. There's a guy named Jocko Willink, an author, and he says there are no bad teams, only bad leaders. And unfortunately, I was living proof of that. And so I just, I'm a faith based guy. And I said, God, I don't know why that just happened, but I'm going to do everything in my power to not let that happen to other people. And so that's where it started. At
Wow.
the time, I didn't have the answers. So we knew we had to do some research and studying what the best leaders actually do. And, 5 years later, that research is a culmination of principles and tools and strategies to help people elevate the way that they lead.
Yeah. In the book, you discuss some leadership styles that people typically fall into. Would you be willing to share those with us?
Of course. Let me preface this by saying that there are 5 leadership styles from our research that emerged. These are not meant to be a personality profile. This is not meant to put any leader in a box, because leadership is a journey and not a destination. So
Mhm.
you can get better, you can get worse, you can grow, you can develop. So it's very important to, as you listen to this or you hear these 5 styles, you can think about how you're currently leading, but it doesn't mean you're set like this forever. So what's important here is that there's 5 leadership styles, each related to how well a leader leverages love and discipline in the way that they lead. So let's define these 2 terms just to make sure we're on the same page. Because when I talk about love, I'm not talking about any kind of HR violation. Okay. What I'm talking
Right.
about is to contribute to someone's long term success and well being. That's it. Do you will the good of another? And leaders who do that absolutely perform better than those who don't. And discipline, just as misunderstood, is it's simply defined as to promote standards in order for an individual to choose to be at their best. You can't actually choose for anybody else. But what you can do as a leader is to set a really high bar about what's expected here and then help people go meet and exceed it. And if they don't, then you can use accountability. But the point here is that how well a leader uses those 2 things is critical in their current leadership style. So a leader who uses low love, low discipline is what we call the manage style of leadership. Typically thinks about themselves first, rarely does things that elevates other people, more of just a manager and title alone. A leader that uses high discipline, low love is what we call the rule style of leadership. Leverage, my way or the highway, rely heavily on the rules of the standards, not a whole lot of contributing to someone's long-term success and well-being going on.
Oh yeah,
These
we've all
leaders,
worked for those people.
yeah, we might have had a dad that looks like that.
Yeah.
But the point is that those leaders can either get really great results quickly because people buy into it, but then over time they have a tough time sustaining it because people get kind of drowned out with all the rules and regulations, and eventually that voice kind of gets muddled. Um, a leader that uses high love, low discipline is what we call the please style of leadership. These are typically leaders who they don't like having the tough conversations. They'd rather just not have them to keep harmony.
Uh,
Um,
oh, the
the
people pleasing type.
Yeah, the people
Yeah.
pleasers. That's right.
Yeah.
These are people that, it doesn't mean they're not in a position of leadership, but they're rarely ever going to get promoted. They're going to kind of stick at one layer of an organization. Their teams typically underperform a little bit.
Well, and they probably typically need just more validation, which is more kind of self-serving.
That's exactly right. That
Yeah.
is exactly anything to avoid conflict.
Yeah.
They're all in. They're all in. And then the most popular style of leadership falls right in the middle, which the support style of leadership. These are good leaders, just not great. They use high love, high discipline at different times. They leverage them in different ways, but they just have another level or that they can go to from a leadership perspective. And then those leaders that use high love and high discipline is what we call the elevate style of leadership. And these leaders typically get results. We see anywhere from a 14% increase in employee engagement, 11% decrease in voluntary turnover, and they just get better results. You could go plug them in almost any organization or in any situation, and over time, I'm not sure how long it would be, they would start to get the results for that team or that organization.
Okay, obviously anybody that's listening to this is going to want to fall under this last category of elevation with their
Mm-hmm.
leadership. But how does one develop into that? Let's say that they are more any of the first 4 that you mentioned. What do you think the journey is like in the middle? Like, how difficult has it been as you've coached and seen people go through this for people that are going from that more like one-sided managerial style
Mm-hmm.
to one who elevates? How can you empower them to find victories in being in the middle?
Great question. 3
Thanks.
words, really 4. Find joy in the journey. I mean, I know it sounds so simple, but finding joy in the journey is paramount, because you're not going to go from the managed style of leadership to the elevate style of leadership in a day. You're
Right.
not going to, it takes time. It takes a lot of effort. It takes a lot of practice. It
Takes
might take,
accountability, I would imagine.
absolutely. It
Hmm.
takes time and effort, and it's hard. It is not easy. So making sure that we get people's mindset to find joy in the journey of saying, I'm on a journey to get better from a leadership perspective, and I'm going to work on doing the right things every single day, and know that all I'm measuring is, can I be a better version of myself than I was yesterday? Can I be a better leader than I am this year than I was last year? And that mindset is what builds the skill and the confidence that in 5 years, in 10 years, you will be a drastically different leader than
Hmm.
you were 5 years earlier. Here's the problem. What have you done for me lately? I want it right now, John. It is 2020, man, and I can get everything else at my fingertips from my phone.
Yeah.
Why can't I build the skill immediately? And that's a hard thing. It is a very hard thing. But you ask what it takes. It takes finding joy in the journey and having HR executives or a coach or in the workshop to communicate to people that it takes time and it's going to take a lot of hard work, and I'm going to be here with you through it.
I love that. And I hope people take note. Okay, we've covered a lot in the book. Are there any principles that are more important today that we haven't yet talked about?
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's 8 principles in the book. One of my favorites right now that I think leaders kind of miss is the 4th principle, which is people persevere because of purpose and not pay. And the only reason why this principle exists is because no one is saying that pay isn't important or compensation isn't critical, but it's those purpose driven organizations and leaders that tend to outperform the rest. I mean, just look at Chick-fil-A in your backyard in Atlanta. I
Oh,
mean,
yeah.
they perform four they do 4 times more revenue per store than Kentucky Fried Chicken, and they're open 6 days a week versus 7. I mean, again,
It's exceptional,
regardless,
isn't it?
it's exceptional, and certainly chicken's better, but is it 4 times better? No. And the reason why I share that is because regardless of the purpose or, what Chick-fil-A ties itself to versus what other organizations tie themselves to, it's leaders who get that they are the connector of cause for their people that outperform the rest. And one of my
Hmm.
favorite stories about this is from a company called Movement Mortgage. And Movement Mortgage is based in South Carolina. It's a very purpose-driven organization. They exist to love and serve people and what they do, and they're all about it. But we're talking about a 4,000 person organization, and there are lots of jobs within that company that doesn't feel very purposeful. And so,
Hmm.
one of their managers she leads a team that completes all of the closing documents at closing time. So her team takes, bank statements and all this detailed work, and they put them in documents, and then their movement clients sign these documents at closing. It's not real sexy work, Beth.
I was just thinking that.
In fact, it seems rather boring. But what she had this idea that she's like, I've got to create more of a connection to our cause, and I've got to create more purpose behind the work for my team. And so what she came up with this idea that every time one of their agents were at closing where their clients were signing their documents, those movement employees would take a picture of the people that were signing those documents and then text them back to her. And one picture came back of a single mother with her daughter buying their very first house. And she said the instant that picture came back of that mom signing those documents that her team created, my team's energy went through the roof.
Wow.
Because we weren't just creating closing documents anymore. We were helping make dreams become a reality.
Oh,
Now, I don't
wow.
know
That's
about
great.
you, but where would you rather go to work? Would you rather go to work to make dreams become a reality, or would you rather go to work to create closing documents?
Yeah, the first one.
Same work, different purposes.
Hmm.
And this is why it's so important, because someone on that team could get offered $5,000, $10,000 more dollars from somebody else. and the purpose of that work is not going to be the same at the other organization. So are they going to leave for 5 or 10 grand? Or are they going to stay to best live out that purpose or that cause of the
Mhm.
work that team's doing? And it's so powerful. It is so powerful.
Yeah,
Not to
what a
mention,
perspective switch
oh,
too.
it's a perspective switch, and I just
Mhm.
love it because most leaders of teams or particularly of teams in a big organization, they put that on somebody else. They put it on their mission or their vision or their values of the whole organization, but that's not really where cause and purpose comes to life. It comes to life in the work that's done every single day. And
Yeah.
so I would love to see more leaders feel like they're the connector of cause and to take that responsibility seriously to connect their people to the deeper purpose behind their work.
You're very good at motivating. Do you know this?
I appreciate you saying that, but
You are. I mean, I hope that people are like, "Yeah," as they listen because yeah, you're right. A motto on the website or like on your like, "Hey, congrats, you got the job," paperwork, that doesn't really inspire purpose, but the day to day, it's that I mean, that's where it practically plays out, and all of what you just said just made me wanna run laps, so thanks, John.
just
You're
think
gonna
about
kill
that
it.
word inspire at the beginning of our conversation, right?
Yeah.
If you're going to go breathe life into people, um, a great way to do that is through cause, is through purpose,
Mhm.
and giving them that purpose that they can't see for themselves. And that's not just a John Eades thing. It's not just my responsibility. It is everybody who's in that position's responsibility to go inspire their people. And I appreciate you saying that. It's very kind words to say to me, but it's the leaders that are listening to this, or those
Mhm.
HR executives that are listening to this, to say it's your job too.
Yeah, absolutely it is. Well, John, we're going to take a very quick break, but we'll be right back after this. You're listening to the Project HR podcast. Today's guest is John Eades, author of Building the Best: 8 Proven Leadership Principles to Elevate Others to Success. We are back. As we wrap things up, John, I did want to reiterate that you are the CEO of Learnloft. We haven't talked about that much. And Learnloft, from what I understand, offers leadership assessments for organizations. They provide workshops, coaching sessions, and online micro learning programs. Can you tell us more about that and how people can get in touch with you if they want to learn more?
Learnloft exists to turn managers into leaders and create healthier places to work. So that's our mission. And everything we do tries to best live out that mission, whether it be the assessments that we create to help leaders identify how they're currently leading, or the programs that we provide either online or in person to help develop those skills. And so everything we do is with that mission in mind. And so oftentimes we partner with HR leaders or learning and development leaders to power their leadership development initiatives. Again, the whole purpose of this is their leaders and their people, and we just partner with them to bring that proven content or those proven assessments to help develop their people. And it's been a phenomenal journey. Yeah, I appreciate you asking the question, but I would just I would be remiss if I didn't, at least because of the title of this talk and what you guys are doing to help HR leaders, to just share a message with them, because
Please do.
I don't believe there's a more important role in organizations today than human resources.
Well
I know
said.
that sounds like a hot take, but I fundamentally believe that to be true for two big reasons. The first is we need an advocate in organizations constantly talking about the human element of work and the importance of that, because certainly technology is eating our organizations and world, as it should, but there's still human beings at the center of it. I was spending time with a CEO of a organization of 17,000 people, and I'll never forget what he said to me. He said, "John, I don't worry about the growth of our revenue and earnings at the end of every quarter. What I care about is having 17,000 servant leaders, because I know if I have 17,000 servant leaders, our organization will be growing." And I love that perspective. And not every CEO feels that way, which is why we need HR leaders that have that kind of oomph and that kind of passion for bringing these ideas to their organization. So number one, the people that are listening to this, if you're in HR, just know that we need you more than ever. And it won't be easy. It won't be an easy road to get these programs invested in or developed in or get time off of the job, but it is worth it. And I hope that you'll take that responsibility seriously because we need you more now than ever.
Well said. And I don't think I can have a better response than that, John. We will definitely put the link to Learnloft in this episode's companion, along with the link to order Building the Best. So be sure to sign up for that at projectionsinc.com/podcast, and we'll send it right over. However, before you do that, be sure to listen to the rest of this interview because we are not done yet, John. It's time for our lightning round questions. These are the questions we ask every guest of the podcast. Are you up for the challenge, John?
Of course.
All right. Topic showdown. Your book, your business, and your podcast all center on the topic of leadership. In your opinion, which of the following is the more cringeworthy synonym for leader? The big cheese or the top dog?
The top dog.
Yeah, that's my answer too.
The top dog.
That's the worst. What's the worst job interview question you've ever been asked?
I'm going to share one from a client of ours that asked their people because it was so bad. He was looking for what people have kind of a hospitality mentality. And he asked the question in the interview process, when something really bad happens, how would you respond? Now, it might seem on the surface that it's not a terrible question, but people with a hospitality mentality, they don't let it get to that point where a customer would be irate. They certainly don't try to. And so I like questions that are more proactive in nature that says, what do you do to ensure that somebody doesn't get irate versus what do you do when someone gets irate? Because then we're looking at it on a reactive basis versus a proactive basis. So I know it's not the worst question in the world, but it's top of mind.
No, that's good. And I like your version of being more specific too. What is your favorite thing about working in leadership development?
Seeing people's lives change.
What's the best piece of advice you've ever been given?
Patience is a virtue.
Who or what inspires you?
Right now, my wife. But what's amazing about it is I look for inspiration in everything that I do. So if I decide to watch a show one night, I look for lessons that I could learn from it that would help me or my organization or the people that we get the opportunity to teach. So I look for it everywhere. And my answer would be look for inspiration in everything that you do, because you can always find something that can help you or the people that you get the opportunity to lead.
That's great. I'm going to remember that too. John, I really appreciate how you are always learning. I think that that's a great takeaway for us who are listening, including myself. Is to never just shut your brain off, except for when you're sleeping and napping. But to look for inspiration everywhere, I think that's amazing. And I appreciate you sharing that with us and with me. It has been such a pleasure getting to talk to you. And I appreciate you sharing your wisdom with us and our Project HR family. So thank you so much again for joining us.
You're more than welcome.
And thanks again to our listeners. I want to mention one more time, in case you didn't catch it before, don't forget to grab the companion for this episode at projectionsinc.com/podcast. And remember, if you'd like to be on Project HR or know someone who would, feel free to email us at projecthr@projectionsinc.com. And finally, we'd love for you to hit that subscribe button so you never miss a single episode of Project HR. While you're there, please rate us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts or leave us a rating or review wherever you get your content. We love hearing your feedback, so thank you sincerely for sharing. Well, that's it from me for now. Let's make it a great day at work.